Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are starting a brand new series on the channel. Recently, the Dungeon Dudes have been going through a series of their own, in which they, basically theory craft what kind of parties you would make with four of the same class. No multi-classing. So, all fighters, all paladins, all rangers. And this intrigued me. Because listening to their explanations, I mean, they went full on in depth into the different subclasses, the different playstyles, how good each party was in the pillars of like combat, exploration, and dialogue, I guess, as well as even going as far as to go over what campaign these characters would play and what the kind of vibe would be. Now, I'm not going for anything like that specifically, but the idea of this video series is that I kind of take that concept and put it into BG3, looking at the various different pieces of equipment, feats, and, subclasses in order to create a unique party of four, all using the same subclasses, and in a similar fashion to the Dungeon Dudes, no multi-classing. Essentially, for the next few weeks, you're going to be getting 4 single-class builds in one video every week. Now, these builds will be designed to synergize with each other, but they should stand fair enough as well. They should stand up pretty well in any party, but I feel like having the challenge of having to make each character feel somewhat unique while still being, fairly similar, I think it's going to be an interesting task, and I'm up for the challenge. Now, obviously, there is a big caveat from D&D compared to BG3. D&D has a lot of subclasses, whereas BG3, most classes in the game only have 3 subclasses, which means there's already going to be some overlap. So in most of these videos, there are going to be repeating subclasses. However, I think I've come up with ways to make each of those builds feel different despite using the same subclass. But without further ado, let's get into the builds. Now, as far as this party, I think that these guys are a legendary group of mercenaries, basically commandos. You have a job you want done, you have a target you want taken out, you have a stronghold that you want stormed, you call these guys. These guys are the A-team of Baldur's Gate, comprised of people from all different walks of life coming together under a similar goal, using their various skill sets to take out their targets. And each of these guys have different similar but different skill sets. They're all combat focused, however, each of their approaches to combat is extremely different, and again, they play off of each other very, very well. So, let's get into the first build, which, if I can actually maneuver the UI correctly... Nope, that's not the first build. This one is. So, our first build today, if I can get the camera right, there we go, is a Gold Dwarf Battle Master fighter. Now, again, no multi-classing here. So the idea with this build was to create a tank, someone who is going to be redirecting attacks from enemies, either large groups or bosses, onto themselves, and then retaliating in turn. Now, obviously, in an all-fighter party, having a dedicated tank seems a bit strange, but it does give me room to make the other characters a little bit more squishy, so that we can better utilize their offensive strengths. So take a bit out of their defense, put it into their offense, and as such, the tank makes up the downfall. So, each of these builds are going to come packed with a couple of feats as well, again, to distinguish them. So let's go over the feats I chose here. We have Shield Master, allowing us to, if a spell forces us to make a dexterity saving throw, you can use our reaction to shield ourselves. On a failed saving throw, we only take half damage. On a successful save, we don't take any. The idea of this build is to be a kind of sword and board character, getting as much AC as we possibly can, and being able to use various features to make us incredibly hard to hit. Having high AC is great and will allow us to avoid a lot of melee attacks. However, spells were still an issue, so picking up Shield Master, which I've never actually used in a build before, I'm pretty sure, felt really interesting, and I feel like, again, now we have the ability to tank both spells and melee and weapon attacks, so I felt like this feat felt right at home. As far as the general leveling scheme for this, I mean, the the best part of Fighter is that they come with 4 feats built in, so you can take the feats, the ability scores, in any level you like. I've basically, on all of these builds, taken 2 ability scores and 2 feats. In this case, I put ability scores into Dex and Constitution, setting them both to 16, putting Charisma at 12, because I wanted someone to have a little bit of Charisma, and Wisdom at 14 for those saving throws as well. Intelligence and Strength were left at 8, since we're using a Dexterity weapon. We also do have a couple of other things. I believe my other feat is Sentinel. Sentinel is going to give us a few things, namely opportunity of attacks now have advantage. Whenever we hit a creature with an opportunity attack, it can no longer move for the rest of the turn. And Vengeance. When an enemy within melee range attacks an ally, you can use a reaction to make a weapon attack against that enemy. Basically, it means that another character on the team can basically bunch up next to you, and you'll be able to protect them. If an enemy comes up to you after they attack you and then tries to go for someone else, they'll have a harder time getting away. And also we're bundling this with the Protection Fighting style, which whenever we have a shield, we impose disadvantage on an attack against an ally within 1.5 meters, but we must be able to see the attacker. So basically the idea is that you and the rest of the party kind of move as one, or at least one or two, and then you can protect them from pretty much anything. And we also gain Shield Master as well, also gives us, while wielding a shield, we have a +2 bonus to dex saves. So overall, we're going to be extremely tanky, basically making us unable to take damage from a lot of sources. Well, not flat out unable, but we're going to be tanking a lot of things, especially with the support from our other teammates. So, and again, the reason we went Gold Dwarf here and kind of maxed out our Constitution is so that we get that massive hit point pool, because Gold Dwarves gain an extra 1 HP per level, so that's an extra 12 HP, and we have a nice, healthy 148 here, perfect for a tank. Now, as far as the proficiencies and such go, this is the character that I mean, you can kind of go for whatever you like here. As you can see, we have a lot of saving throw proficiencies. Intelligence is our biggest issue, but the rest are solid. Maybe Charisma could be better. And as far as our proficiencies go, we have some decent ones here. I mean, you can pause the video to have a look at these if you so desire. They're not really too important for this build. And I mean, the basic fighter stuff, I mean, everyone's getting second wind and action surge. But let's go into really what makes this tank a tank, the Battlemaster maneuvers. So, with the Battlemaster maneuvers, we have a bunch of ways to tank for the party. Namely, goading attack, both ranged and melee. I have a hand crossbow here, and we'll get to more of that in a minute, but being able to basically force enemies to attack us with goading attack, because goading attack, whether it's ranged or melee, makes us goad an enemy into attacking only us, and it gains disadvantage on attack rolls on anyone but us. So, they're going to have to come after us, which means that we are going to be immediately tanking as well. We also gain Distracting Strike, meaning that when we attack our target, we can distract them, giving our allies advantage on their next attack roll against it, basically allowing us to not only tank for our allies, but also give them an opening. And speaking of tanking, Evasive Footwork is going to make all enemies have disadvantage on melee attacks against us. This doesn't cost any resource other than our superiority die. You can do it per turn. So basically, you still get your action and your bonus action here, which is great. We also have Disarming Attack to be able to knock our weapons out of our enemies' hands, forcing them to pick them up. Feinting Attack to allow us to attack with advantage and deal bonus damage. And Trip Attack to knock our enemies prone, so that our enemies can get basically advantage that way as well, and force our enemies to have to stand up, again making it harder for them to run away from us if they try to go for another ally. All of these put together basically force our enemies to focus on us, and then we can really and then that allows our enemies to our allies to really put the hurt on them. Overall, it feels like a really fun and unique combat style. It feels like Battlemaster 2AT, getting right into the thick of it and just going ham with various offensive attacks that also give your whole party these kind of advantages, which I really, really like. And of course, because we're a fighter as well, we're getting 3 attacks. Going all the way to level 11 in fighter gives you improved extra attack, meaning that we can use 3 of these per turn. You will have seen in the combat footage that we can just kind of pluck 3 enemies with a goading attack in a turn, and they're all basically forced to come and attack us, allowing us to be a really, really effective tank. Yes, this does tend to burn through superiority die, but again, we have 5 of these, meaning that we can kind of do an initial burst and go from there. If you wanted to pick up the Martial Adept feat, it wouldn't exactly be a miss on this build. You could maybe take away a con ability score improvement to get that extra superiority die, giving you 6 total, as well as a couple of extra maneuvers as well. You can kind of work that into the build if you like, but I liked the idea of having maximum constitution because that felt right for a tank. We also have other ways of goading our enemies into attacking us, but that comes from our equipment, so let's look at that now. Your main endgame goal as a weapon is going to be the Duelist Prerogative. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to be getting the critical hit buff because we need our offhand to be empty, and of course, we're not going for that here, but we don't really care about that. We're not the main damage dealer at the party. We do get a second reaction, which allows us to kind of make better use of a lot of our features, as well as add extra necrotic damage to our attacks with this weapon, which is always nice. But the main things we're getting from here is Duelist Enthusiasm, giving us the ability to attack as a bonus action for free, essentially giving us 4 attacks per turn without haste, which is insane, as well as Challenge to a Duel, forcing an enemy to attack only us and inflicting bleeding on them. And this actually gets buffed by some other pieces of equipment that I didn't really realize it would, but hey, works for me. So we have a bunch of different ways. Even if we run out of superiority die, we can still make our enemies attack only us. This will probably be better for bosses where you only have one target, and this only costs a bonus action too. And again, for your shield, you can go with whatever you like. I just picked the Shield of Scorching Reprisal because it has some stuff that works out nicely for us, namely resistance to fire damage. Resistance is always good for a tank build, as well as Blazing Retaliation. Once per short rest as a bonus action, we can raise our armor class by 1, making it a total of 22, and any attackers who attack us with a melee attack and miss, take 1d6 fire damage for a turn. So it's basically just an extra bit of, like, if you're forced to attack me, you're gonna have a bad time, which I really like. We're also going to be pairing this with the Fabricated Arbalest, which is going to be a +2 ranged heavy crossbow, which again, felt right for this build. That comes with a couple of benefits that work for us. Illuminating Shots allows us to inflict Radiating Orb upon a target, meaning that they are going to have a penalty to their attack rolls to hit us, which means we're harder to hit, perfect for a tank build, as well as picking up Dazzling Ray as well. It's basically a weaker version of Sunbeam, basically firing a beam of light right in front of you that deals 2d10 radiant damage and blinds enemies. Overall, pretty cool little thing here. We can do that once per short rest, which is nice. So overall, we have a decent weapon and shield kit here to be able to make us really, really hard to hit, making us an effective tank. Now, of course, the Duelist Prerogative is an Act 3 option, so my Act 1 option that I would recommend to go for here is the Rupturing Blade. It's just a fairly standard +1 rapier that you can pick up quite early, as well as it comes with a unique attack called Searing Blood, dealing a bit of extra fire damage, as well as a bit of extra piercing damage. You'll take a little bit of slashing damage yourself, but it's fine, it doesn't really matter. Now, as far as like armor and such goes, I decided to kind of save a bit of time in the video by not going in depth into early game alternatives for armor with all of these builds, just the weapons. However, I can provide some alternatives off the top of my head as we go. So, just with that little disclaimer out the way, let's keep going on to the regular equipment. First up, we have the Holy Lance Helm. Creatures who miss their attack rolls against the wearer must make a dex save or take 1d4 radiant damage, and we get a +1 to our Constitution saving throws. This basically makes it so that, again, if we're going to be attacking and if we're going to get attacked and be really hard to hit, we're just getting free damage pretty much all the time. You can pick this up right away in Act 1, and it fits the build perfectly. Next up, we're playing a Dwarf, so let's pick up the Dwarven Splint Mail, making us take 1 less piercing damage, gain a +1 bonus to strength checks and saving throws. We do get disadvantage on stealth checks, but hey, this isn't exactly a stealthy party, but the main thing we're getting here is a +2 to our Constitution, so even though we only have 2 ability score improvements, because we've taken a few feats, we still get that maxed out Constitution, and again, we're playing a Dwarf, it feels right at home. Next up is the Gauntlet of the War Master. This is an Act 3 option, but pretty much any sort of gloves that add extra damage to your attacks, so like the Flawed Helldust gloves or the Dark Justicia gloves, the rare version, will work with this build. But for now, this is pretty much what you want to aim for in Act 3. Targets have disadvantage on saving throws against your maneuver and weapon actions. So, and we also gain a +1 to attack rolls. So all of these maneuvers that impose a secondary effect, Goading Attack, Distracting Strike, Disarming Attack, Trip Attack, your enemies will have disadvantage on the saves against them, and as you saw earlier, it works with Challenge to a Duel, meaning that you are very, very likely to get all of this stuff off, which is perfect for this build. We want to make sure that enemies are coming for us as much as possible, and these gloves basically secure that. And finally, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, which may seem like a bit of a strange choice, but not being affected by certain surfaces like in Webbed and Entangled, as well as not being able to slip on grease or ice, that's great. That allows us to stay on our feet and be a more effective tank that way, but also having Misty Steps basically kind of once per battle. Well, it says once per short rest, but you short rest after every battle in this game, let's be real. And With Misty Step, it's immediately going to allow you to get into position. If an ally is far away and they're about to be dogged on by a bunch of enemies, like for example our Archer build, which I'll get to later, you can immediately Misty Step to them and start being defensive for them, which I think works really, really well for this build. Just an immediate pop, I'm here, let's get down to business. Felt perfect for this build, so I wanted to include it here. Again, early game option as well, which is always nice. As for the accessories, of course I've gone with the Unflinching Protector Amulet. Any build that claims to be a tank basically needs this. When a nearby ally is targeted by an attack of any kind, you can use your reaction to make that attack automatically miss. This effect can only be used once per short rest. That is insane. Oh yeah, I'll just spend one of my 2 reactions that I have to make it so that this attack just immediately fails against my ally. Couldn't ask for anything more. Next up is After Death Do Us Part. At the end of the day, we are going to be taking a lot of damage. So if we do end up going down, this allows us to rise once more with half of our hit points, but we are gripped to a Shadow Possession, which basically means we attack anyone nearest to us. So hopefully not our allies, but if we're in the thick of a bunch of enemies, then we'll just attack them, and our weapon attacks deal a bit of extra necrotic damage. Now, as of patch 6, Shadow Possession is bugged. It doesn't actually trigger, you just get to get up for free with half your hit points, which is nice, but I do think it would be nice to have Shadow Possession back in play properly, and of course they'll fix that with patch 7, because I feel like it's just nicer flavor-wise, but for now take advantage of the fact that this isn't a thing, that the kind of Shadow Possession isn't really a thing, and just get back up being an even more effective tank. But again, I would still recommend this even when Shadow Possession is fixed, because it's just kind of cool. You could just take so much hits and get back up even when, realistically, you shouldn't be able to. Now that's a tank. It's got like Final Fantasy XIV Dark Knight vibes. And then finally, the Ring of Free Action. We ignore the effects of difficult terrain and cannot be paralyzed or restrained. Again, just making it so you can always get to your allies no matter what. Ensnaring Strike is not going to stop you today. And that is the tank. Overall, what you're getting out of this is just a million and different ways to make it so you are the target of your enemy's attacks, allowing you to take a bunch of hits for your allies and, you know, dish out damage back. Again, all of these extra maneuvers are going to be adding a plus D10 of damage, so even though you're mainly here for tanking purposes, you are no slouch in the damage department. With the ability to do up to 4 attacks per turn using your action and bonus action, you are just going to feel pretty damn powerful. And again, because with these are all single level builds, the progression is going to feel good throughout the entire game, so you really don't have to worry about, like, you know, going out of your way to make sure you get all these different things to optimize your build right away, because none of these builds use the Potion of Everlasting Vigor or Ethel's Boon. You just kind of get to play casually, which I love. So, let's get on to the next build. We have the Battlemage, who is an Eldritch Knight. Now, for this, I kind of wanted to take a definite Spellblade focus, hence the Battlemage name. I didn't really play too much into the kind of weapon bond thing, but I did want to try out a unique combination that people have suggested to me, that I have not actually tried before, and that is dual wielding a sword and a quarterstaff, to create this kind of Battlemage build, kind of like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, where he had his staff and his short sword. This is kind of what I've gone for here. Now, so obviously that means one of our feats we have taken is dual wielder, meaning that we can use 2 weapon fighting even if the weapons we are wielding are light. We cannot dual wield heavy weapons, because a quarterstaff and a longsword, in our case, both lack the light feature. We need dual wield to make this work, but we're getting a +1 to our AC out of it, so hey, it's not too bad. Our other feat in this case, now you have an option. You can go for Spell Sniper and pick up Eldritch Blast if you want a really reliable high damage cantrip, but I decided to go with War Magic instead. War Magic is going to give us advantage on concentration saving throws, so if we decide to cast things like Darkness or Hold Person, as you can see I have on my hotbar there, we're going to be most likely keeping those up. And War Magic as well is also really great, because if we are going to be getting into the thick of things with melee attacks, basically... Oh, sorry, not War Magic, Warcaster. There's the other part of Warcaster, which basically means that if an enemy tries to move out of your melee range, they will be hit with a shocking grasp. So you get into the thick of it, fire spells off in melee range while doing sword attacks, and then back the hell off. It feels really, really fun to play in practice, and you can kind of swap up which hand you kind of have your staff in. If you want to make bonus action attacks for your longsword, swap that into the offhand. But again, we have the War Magic feature from Eldritch Knight, meaning that if we cast a cantrip, we can attack with our bonus action using our main hand weapon. Anyway, so it's entirely up to you what you want to go with. The fighting style we picked with this is 2-weapon fighting, so you have freedom to put whatever you want in either hand. Just be aware that if you put your sword in the offhand, you won't be able to get things like Lacerate or Pommel Strike or Rush Attack, but you can kind of make that work in your favor. Anyway, Again, and we're also going to be getting Eldritch Strike, meaning that whenever we hit a creature with a weapon attack, it has disadvantage on the next saving throw against one of our spells, which can be really, really powerful. Again, our spell options are kind of limited. You kind of have to decide if you want to go for more of a Blaster Caster or maybe a kind of support build, but we get all sorts of cool stuff here. We get Shield, we get Scorching Ray, Shocking Grasp, Magic Missile, which is going to synergize quite nicely in a minute. Darkness, if you want to slap the Eversight Ring on one of these builds and go for a Darkness Devil Sight strategy, which without Devil Sight. Cloud of Daggers, a really nice concentration spell. Hold Person would be great for ensuring critical hits for the rest of your party, probably one of the stronger kind of spells that we have here, and a bunch of useful cantrips as well, and a bunch of other damaging spells. I would say Magic Missile is probably going to be your bread and butter for this build, but you do have a bunch of other options as well. Shadow is going to be really good against the Steel Watchers, for example, so you have a bit of room to play around. I also made this build a Dragonborn just because it felt right to have a Dragonborn Eldritch Knight on the team, and it gives us an innate fire resistance as well, although we are getting it from the Darkfire Shortbow, which I'll get into in a minute. But you know, you just have a ton of stuff going for you here, including like a fire breath, and you have natural resistance to fire as well. But without further ado, let's get into the equipment. So for our main hand weapon, of course, I've gone with Fowler Aluv. We're not focusing on strength here, so if we want our main kind of sidearm weapon here to work well for us, we need something that is finesse, and being a finesse longsword just seemed great to me. We get a +1 to performance, which is neither here nor there for us, but the main thing we get out of this is Fowler Aluv Melody, allowing the sword to hum, basically play a little song with one of two buffs, which both work well for our party. Sing basically gives Bless to all of our allies in a weird way, which is nice, as well as Shriek, which gives a minor version of Bane to all of our enemies, but also means that every time they take damage, they take an extra 1d4 thunder damage. So, get in melee range, which we want to do anyway, so that they're in the aura, and then cast Magic Missile to get an extra d4 of thunder damage on every dart, which is kind of nuts. We only have level 2 spell slots here, but people who have tried out this combination before with like a wizard know how strong this can be, so it's definitely worth talking about for this build. And again, this will also work with any of our spells or our weapon attacks as well. And again, you can go for Weapon Bond if you want to chuck any of this stuff, but you've got ranged spells. Why do you need to throw things? It's not necessary. It's a bit childish even. But of course, our staff of choice, again, since we don't actually have a dedicated spellcaster in this party, we might as well pick up the Marco Heshkir staff. With this, you gain a +1 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls, always nice. You can cast one of your spells without expending a spell slot once per long rest, but we're also going to get Kareska's Favor, giving us access to big spells and effects that we wouldn't normally have access to as an Eldritch Knight. Kareska's Favor can give us spells like Chain Lightning, Fireball, and a bunch of others, including special mechanics as well, like Heat, Lightning Charges, Reverberation, all from this one skill, allowing us to go from just kind of being an Eldritch Knight with some utility and damage spells to a full-on full caster in a weird way, once per short rest. So I feel like this works out perfectly for the build. You definitely want to pick this up, but of course that is an Act 3 option, so in the early game you can pick up the Spell Sparker. Basically, whenever we deal damage with a spell or cantrip, we gain lightning charges, meaning all of our attacks will do a little bit of extra lightning damage, and if we build up enough charges, we can deal a big burst of 1d8 lightning damage. You can pick this up right in Act 1, and it's a nice thing to just have in your offhand to make your spellcasting a bit more effective. We of course also have the Darkfire Shortbow, giving us resistance to fire and cold damage, another way of attacking at range, just in case we do run out of spell slots, which you most likely will, but it also gives us the ability to use haste, allowing us to buff ourselves or one of our allies with haste, which is just brilliant. This guy is kind of a support fighter in this build. I mean, again, we can still do 3 attacks per turn with this guy, mixing in cantrips and useful spells as well, but having the ability to also do support as well is just perfect. And again, slap this on one of our main damage dealers, you're gonna absolutely dominate. I mean, we all know how powerful haste is on certain builds, especially fighters. 6 attacks per turn with just your action. Whoa. Anyways, let's get into the rest of the equipment. First up, we have the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. Whenever we deal damage with a weapon attack, we gain Arcane Acuity for 2 turns, allowing our attacks to have a +1 bonus to attack rolls and difficulty class for each remaining turn. So, for the small cost of slapping an enemy with our sword, which we will be able to do up to 3 times per turn, we're going to stack a massive amount of Arcane Acuity, basically making saving throws against things like Hold Person impossible, and being able to basically guarantee hits with our cantrips and things like Shatter as well. Really, really nice little combo. Cloak of Protection. Out of all of these builds, this build had the lowest base AC because the armor I chose to go with only had 17 AC despite being heavy armor, so I wanted to stack Cloak of Protection as well as the dual wielder bonus. We're now getting a total of 19, which is a bit more respectable. Next up, we have the Rippling Force Mail. This is a heavy armor that felt kinda spellcastery, so I wanted to go for it. Every time we're attacked with slashing, piercing, or bludgeoning damage, we gain a stack of Force Conduit. What Force Conduit does is bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage against the affected entity is reduced by 1 per turn remaining, so we get a little bit of kind of magical tankiness. And when we have 5 or more turns remaining, we deal 1d4 damage in a 6 meter radius. Those charges don't go away either, I'm pretty sure, so as long as you accumulate at least 5 or more charges, you deal force damage every time you're attacked, which can be a nice little bit of retaliation. And I really wanted to include it here because it's a badass looking armor, and again, kind of getting like a magic aura of defense just felt right to me for a build like this. Next up, we have the Daredevil Gloves. It gives us a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, which is nice, but the main ticket here is that our ranged attacks are made as melee spell attacks when adjacent to a hostile creature. So, if we're getting into the thick of it, we can still cast things like Scorching Ray or Ray of Frost or Firebolt without having to worry about having to move away from an enemy first. It's still going to be just as effective, allowing us to not have to worry about positioning in battle. We can just kind of click and forget, which is always nice. And finally, the Boots of Striding. If we're going to be casting concentration spells like Hold Person, Cloud of Daggers, or Haste, we want to make sure that we're not going to get knocked prone and immediately lose that concentration. So, when we cast a spell that requires concentration, we gain momentum for 1 turn, giving us a bit of extra movement speed. But while we are concentrating, we cannot be knocked prone or moved against our will, becoming a magical bulwark, which I absolutely love, and again, obtained right in Act 1, which is always nice. Next up to our accessories, we have the Spell Savant Amulet. Eldritch Knights only get up to 3 level 2 spell slots by default, as well as 4 level 1 spell slots. This is just going to give you a permanent additional level 2 spell slot, giving you a total of 4, which is always nice. And of course, the Ring of Arcane Synergy. If we're going to use a cantrip, if we're going to be using cantrips, we want to make sure it affects our whole build. Arcane Synergy means that our spellcasting modifier is added to our weapon attacks, and since we can make a weapon attack with a bonus action after using our cantrip, whether our weapon is in the main hand or the offhand, we can get a lot of extra damage on our melee attacks with this. And finally, the Ring of Blink. I wanted to get another kind of higher level spell, and I feel like this felt right for this build. Since this build is obviously the least tanky of the bunch, for the most part, I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to be able to kind of get another sort of tricksy magic option that allows us to escape from danger, and Blink is just that. We only get it once per long rest, unfortunately, but you would save this for a big battle anyway, basically allowing you to have a chance to disappear at the end of each turn and make yourself completely invulnerable to harm. But be warned that it will break concentration if you disappear. While the spell itself doesn't take concentration, once you blink out of existence, your concentration ends. So be careful, don't use this and haste together, but if you're in a sticky wicket and you want to make sure you're not going to take damage every turn, you can go for this, which is quite nice. I think it's just a fun little kind of way to add a bit more of that spell casting flavor to our Eldritch Knight. And that is it as well. I mean, overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a bunch of support options. You can pick different spells than the ones I've had here. Maybe, again, grab the Eversight Ring, pop it on one of these builds to get the best use out of darkness, and you're going to be able to overcome a lot of different resistances thanks to your wide kind of array of different elemental attacks. And again, powerful concentration spells. Cloud of Daggers and Hold Person are going to be really, really powerful, and the Magic Missile bread and butter combo with Valor Relief is going to do a lot of damage for you. And again, I wanted to get at least one dual wielder build in here, and this felt like a pretty unique take on the archetype. So, let's move on to the slightly less creative build now. The Champion. Yeah, we're doing Great Weapon Master, Polearm Master. I mean, come on, I've never actually really done this combo properly, so it felt like it made sense for me to kind of give my own take on it, and for the most part this is fairly standard. I've gone with an Orc here for their kind of bonus on critical hit attacks, because we are going to be fishing for those here, as well as, you know, just the general kind of build that they have. I mean, if you're going to be playing a big guy who hits really hard, Orcs are kind of your way to go. So, let's get into the stats. Obviously, here we have a Strength 20 and a Constitution 16 here, boosted up from... we put 2 ability score improvements into Strength. We started at 16. And our 2 feats, as I said, are Great Weapon Master, allowing us to take a -5 penalty to our attack rolls to increase our damage by 10, and we have plenty of ways to mitigate that penalty, but it's not even going to matter. As well as being able to, after we kill an enemy or land a critical hit, which we're going to be doing quite a lot, we can attack with our bonus action with the full brunt of our weapon, which is amazing. We're also going to get access to Polearm Master as well, if I can just find that real quick. Oh, there's the Savage Attacks feature from Orc. Whenever we hit a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, we deal an extra die of weapon damage, which means we're just going to be stupid powerful. And I'm trying to find Polearm Master here, but it's not actually coming up unless I'm pretty dumb. I think I am. Maybe it's over here. There you go. Polearm Master allows us to make an opportunity attack whenever an enemy comes into our reach. And I can attest to this. Great Weapon Master's added to this damage now. I don't think it worked before, but I'll be damned if it does now. It's even in the combat footage. You'll see. We hit a Steel Watcher for like 40-something damage off of an opportunity attack. It's pretty insane. And and Polearm Master does give you something else, but unfortunately it is escaping me at the moment because I'm a bit of an idiot, so I will have the thingy on the screen now and probably insulting myself through text in some way because for some reason I can't remember. But Champion Fighter is going to give us a bunch of stuff. Of course, we're getting improved critical hit, meaning that our critical hit threshold is reduced by 1, meaning we now roll critical hits on a 19 or higher. We also, again, all the fighters got this. I just forgot to mention it before, but I'll mention it now. We're also going to be getting Indomitable. Means that whenever we fail a saving throw, we can roll again using the new result. I believe that's once per short or long rest. I can't exactly remember, but it is in limited supply, but it's still nice to have. And as far as like the other kind of base stuff is concerned, that's really it. Champion does also get an extra fighting style. So, well, of course, we took Great Weapon Fighting. I also picked up Defense, but you can kind of pick up whichever one you like. It doesn't really matter. But let's move past this now and get on to the equipment. Of course, we're using the Halberd of Vigilance. How could we not? It's one of the best Polearm Master weapons in the game. You get a +1 bonus to initiative rolls and advantage on perception checks, which is always nice. But whenever you make an attack roll as a reaction, you make it with advantage. That includes the one from Polearm Master, so that is a big way of getting past Great Weapon Master's penalty. Of course, I'll have a more reliable way of getting past it, but again, it's there if you like it. We also get an extra D4 of force damage on top of this as well, which is always nice. Next up, we have the Dead Shot. This is just kind of here to give us another ranged attacking option, but it also reduces our critical hit threshold, meaning now that we roll a critical hit on an 18 or higher. We also gain Keen Attack. We double our proficiency bonus when rolling ranged attacks with this weapon, unless we have disadvantage. This makes up for our slightly lower dexterity, allowing us to continue using this weapon regardless. Overall, we're mainly here for the critical buff, but it still works as a ranged option for us. As for our armor, I have the Mask of Soul Perception here to give us a +2 bonus to attack rolls, initiative rolls, and perception checks. Basically just helping to offset that Great Weapon Master penalty, giving us a +2 out of the -5. As well as those buffs to initiative rolls are really, really nice, allowing us to act really early on in the battle, getting those big hits in before enemies can act, basically killing them before they get a chance to move. As an earlier game option, something like the Haste Helm to give you momentum so you're able to move into melee range quicker would work quite nicely there. You get that right away in Act 1. Next up, we have the Adamantine Split Armor, an Act 1 armor that I felt worked really nicely for us. It reduces all incoming damage by 2, which is great. Again, we're going to be in the thick of things. Whenever a melee attack hits us, the attacker is sent reeling for 3 turns, basically meaning that they have a penalty to attack rolls. Now that I'm thinking about it, this would have worked well on the tank, but hey, you can kind of swap things out as you like. Perhaps you want more constitution in this build. Again, the equipment on these builds, you can kind of swap them back and forth unless we're kind of relying on them for feats, so feel free to mix and match a lot of these builds around. Next up, the Bone Spike Gloves. Our attacks ignore resistance to slashing, piercing, bludgeoning damage. Great Weapon Master does a lot of damage already, even if our attacks are resisted. But now we just plow right through that resistance as well, meaning that we're going to be dealing a lot of damage. And finally, the Boots of Persistence. These are just kind of a throwaway slot. I just put something that's generically strong in here, giving us freedom of movement on Longstrider, giving us a bit more maneuverability around the battlefield, but really you can slap anything here that you think will be useful. It doesn't matter, so anything in the early game would be nice. Evasive Shoes could work really well here. It doesn't really matter. Put whatever you like in the slot. I've also gone for the Broodmother's Revenge and Ring of Regeneration combo. Now, I've been told in the comment sections of previous videos that this doesn't actually work, but I have tested it on patch 6. I believe I used it even in the stream where I built the Dark Urge build that we did recently, the Fire That Burns Within, and it worked there. So there seems to be conflicting reports on that. I do believe these work, but either way, being able to get a little bit of extra points of damage on our attacks is nice, but this really is a throwaway slot. Hell, if you wanted to slap something like the Amulet of Greater Constitution on here, feel free to do so. It's entirely up to you, put whatever you like in the slot. I just kind of went for this combo, because I felt like using the Ring of Regeneration kind of made sense. I liked having that extra little bit of healing on this build, because again, if we're jumping into the thick of things, we might be taking quite a bit of damage, so getting that bit of extra healing off is nice. But again, swap the equipment around on these builds as you like. And finally, the Risky Ring giving us advantage on all attack rolls, but we receive disadvantage on saving throws. With our tank build taking a lot of the kind of heat for us, the disadvantage on our saving throws doesn't actually matter as much, basically giving us advantage on all of our attacks all the time. You may feel like this isn't as necessary with the Halberd's kind of bonus thing, but this gives us advantage on all of our attacks rather than just a select situation, so I feel like it's still valuable on this build. But I mean, what else is there to say? This is basically the Power Builder's build. This is the big, high damage Polearm Master boom shakalaka build. You're just going to be dealing absolute boatloads of damage with this build. There's no real other way to describe it. You are just going to absolutely wreck shop no matter what. And you know what? I felt like power building for once. I mean, look at this guy. Does that look like the face of mercy to you? And finally, we have the Token Archer Sharpshooter build. Let's get the camera on you, girly. Yep, there we go. I decided to go for a Wood Elf here to get that bit of extra movement speed and an extra skill proficiency, because my kind of goal for this build was to have it be the one build I can at least kind of do stealth and conversation. This build is basically the leader, using our maneuvers, because this is the other Battle Master fighter, to be able to support our allies in different ways. We have Commandos Strike, allowing our allies to get an extra weapon attack, Rally to give them temporary HP, Trip Attack to knock them over, Disarming Strike, Maneuvering Attack to give them a bit of extra movement speed, and of course Precision Attack to allow us to gain a bonus to our attack rolls to overcome Sharpshooter, which is basically a great weapon master for bows. I mean, who doesn't know what this does? Take a -5 to penalty to the attack roll, but deal an additional 10 damage. So this build is kind of a mixture of a kind of commander build, but also being able to basically be able to support our allies that way, but also it is a archer build, staying out of the thick of combat and doing massive damage with Sharpshooter. As for our other feat that I decided to go with alongside Sharpshooter, I actually went with Lucky, because this can benefit ourselves or our team. We can use a luck point to gain advantage on our next attack roll or saving throw, or make an enemy reroll their attack roll. So we can help out our allies by commanding them to dodge attacks, or overcome, or give ourselves advantage to deal with Sharpshooter, which I think is quite nice. And again, all of these maneuvers together are really going to allow us to assist our enemy. Assist our enemies? I certainly hope not. Assist our allies, again making them a bit tankier, giving them extra attacks, allowing them to move even more, allowing our melee builds to get in closer, and again, disarming and distracting. We've gone with distracting here as well, allowing us to, from a distance, distract our targets, making it so our all of our allies have advantage to hit, and then also being able to knock our enemy's weapon away. So, again, similar kind of idea to the tank, but they're done very, very differently, taking the maneuvers that we didn't take over there. Now, as for the rest of this, I mean, it's fairly simple, like I said. We kind of have, like, again, I went with Wood Elf to get that extra movement speed, because the whole thing about being kind of a ranged build is being able to move out of the thick of combat. But let's get into the equipment. Oh, of course, also we went with the archery fighting style, because of course we did a +2 bonus to ranged weapons. But anyways, equipment, for real this time. Of course, our bow of choice, once you get into the later acts, is the Gone to Mail, basically the best bow in the game. +3, possibility to inflict Guiding Bolt on hit, so you inflict Guiding Bolt and then basically gain advantage on all attacks against that target, making subsequent shots easier to hit. It can glow, but I've turned that off, as well as gives us a unique version of haste usable once per long rest. Only the use works for 5 turns, but does not make us lethargic when it's over, so basically when you face down a boss, you can go for an absolute Nova round of damage, getting off 6 shots. As well as we've got Bolt the Celestial Light, Celestial Light, allowing us to do extra radiant damage, frighten the enemy, and then ranged weapon attacks made by the Gone to Mail deal an additional 1d4 radiant damage for a couple of turns after hitting. Very, very powerful skill, definitely your end game goal, but of course a decent early game weapon is the Titan String Bow, a +1 bow that deals additional damage equal to our strength modifier. Now yes, I know, our strength is at 8, but the way the Titan String Bow works is no matter how low your strength modifier is, it will always deal an additional 1 damage minimum. So as an early game option to carry us up for a while, this is still going to do a massive amount of damage, as well as if you decide to put on, maybe use a potion of Cloud Giant Strength, you will be able to get massive amount of damage out of this. So that's that's kind of a use for those 3 you can get early on. Now, as with all of my primarily ranged builds, I like to slap a little combo here in the melee slot, because you're pretty much never going to see it, and it just adds some passive buffs. The Knife of the Undermountain King is going to reduce our critical hit threshold, meaning that we now hit a crit on a 19 or higher. It's a bit similar to our other build with Champion. This basically makes it so that even with Sharpshooter, we're more likely to get crits off, which is lovely. And also, whenever we roll a 2 damage or less on a damage die, we can reroll the die taking the higher result, meaning that we're always going to be doing very, very high damage with our attacks. We also have advantage on attack rolls against lightly or heavily skewered creatures while using the sword, which doesn't really matter for us, especially since this feature is currently broken, but we're mainly here for the critical hit reduction. As well as you can toss any shield in here, and I've got a shield +1, which multiple of these can be found throughout Act 3, and it just gives you a +3 to your armor class, which is lovely, but again, any shield will work. Next up for our equipment, the Marksmanship Hat. We've already given the Mask of Soul Perception to our melee version to our warrior build, the melee kind of champion. So this is the next best thing for us, giving us a +1 bonus to ranged attack rolls. Basically helping to offset that sharpshooter penalty a little bit, but not as much. Next up, the Shade Slayer Cloak. I did go with the criminal background in order to get stealth proficiency, and because we have such high dexterity, we have a +9. So if we wanted to open combat by stealthing with this build, and then getting an extra chance to roll a critical hit, basically allowing it to be a 18 or higher, we basically can just open with a big critical hit attack, which is nice. Next up, the 1T Scale Mail. I wanted some medium armor for this build because, again, we have high dexterity, might as well. Without the shield here, we'd have 20 AC here with this armor, which is great. Also, I love the way it looks. We add our full dexterity modifier to our armor class. Additionally, we do not impose disadvantage on stealth ability checks, and we gain a +1 to initiative rolls, making us a bit faster. Of course, if you want a bit more AC, you can upgrade this to the Armor of Agility in Act 3, but I personally like sticking with the 1T. Again, that +1 to initiative bonus is really, really nice for us, allowing us to, again, get the drop on our foes. You actually will notice that with this party, a lot of our skills help us boost our initiative, so we're always able to act first. And again, on a build that can get on like 4 builds that can attack 3 times per turn or more, with many different ways of stacking damage, you can end encounters before they start, which is amazing. We also have the Legacy of the Masters. We gain a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls with weapons. So again, offsetting Sharpshooter and adding a bit of extra damage to it. And finally, the Boots of Speed, allowing us to use Click Heels, which allows us to dash as a bonus action similar to Rogue, but it comes with the added benefit of actually doubling our movement speed instead of just increasing it, as well as giving enemies disadvantage on opportunity attacks against us, allowing us to get out of danger when we need to. Perfect for a build that likes to be at range. Next up, this is a complete throwaway slot, but we do have a distinct lack of healing on this build, aside from potions, so I've gone with the Amulet of Restoration here, so we can kind of have a little bit of healing. It's not much, but it kind of felt on theme for the build, so I wanted to show it off here, but honestly, put anything else in this slot that you can find, anything that you think would work. Next up, the Killer's Sweetheart. Whenever we kill a creature, our next attack roll will be a critical hit. Now, it says your next attack roll, but this is not actually how the ring works. It's a bit misleading. What you actually get is a reaction that doesn't actually cost you a reaction, but you can bank and use whenever. So basically, for the price of killing an enemy, which hopefully you're already going to be doing, you get a free critical hit to use whenever you want. And again, on a Sharpshooter build, that's pretty powerful. And finally, again, I wanted a little bit of spellcasting on this build, so I've gone with the Shifting Corpus Ring. Invisibility is going to allow us to basically guarantee that we can get that opening round with a pretty powerful hit, giving us advantage while invisible. Of course, after our first shot, we'll be gone, but we can either use this to... that will be gone, I should say. However, we can use this to get out of danger or be able to sneak into position before combat to be able to fire the perfect sharpshooter shot. As well as Blur. Again, we're not really maintaining concentration or anything, and Blur basically would make attackers have disadvantage against us. Disadvantage on attack rolls against us. I don't know why I can't speak today. For 10 turns. Again, once per long rest, unfortunately. But again, we're not concentrating really on anything with this weapon, other than maybe Celestial Haste. So, you know, we can just basically have this up and just get that advantage, basically, for free. But yeah, with that, those are the builds. The full fighter party is in full swing, and, well, I mean, you can see the combat footage. I mean, we all knew that a party full of fighters is going to be strong, and this is no exception. These guys are monsters. Between Sharpshooter, Great Weapon Master, your haste from various different sources, you're going to have most of the enemy encounter completely obliterated before the battle even begins. And if there's an off chance that even one of your enemies gets a smart idea to try and attack one of you, we have the tank to mitigate that. Now again, these guys don't have to be run together. Slap them into any other party that you deem works. Basically, if you feel like you want a decent tank build, there you go. If you want a decent Great Weapon Master build, there you go. If you want a decent kind of Sharpshooter build, there's another unique take on it. Just do whatever works best for you. I am overall pretty proud of how this turned out. I feel like the builds have enough distinctness between all of them, despite being so similar, obviously still using the same base class, that each of these party members feels like they bring their own thing to the table. Again, ranged attacks, melee attacks, tanking, magic, it all comes into this build. Obviously, these builds are going to have a bit of trouble in maybe something like dialogue, which is why I kind of gave our archer build here a 16 in charisma at base, because that felt like the best way to work it in my opinion, so at least we have someone who's good in dialogue, and then the rest are just very, very, very good at combat, like, damn. Like I said, encounters deleted. Encounter us, delete us, they're gone. Like, I would say this would do honor mode pretty friggin' easily. I don't know, I haven't beaten honor mode yet. I mean, I totally have beaten honor mode like 50 times. I mean, what do you think I take this game for? I make builds for this game all the time. What do you think I haven't beaten honor mode? Of course I have. Totally. 100%. Anyways, yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, that's the video. I mean, I don't know really what else to say. I mean, again, if you made it this far in, thank you all so much for watching. Again, this is going to be kind of a fun series. I mean, obviously, spellcastery builds like Sorcerer, Wizard, Druid, those are all going to be a bit easier to build for. But the things like Rogue and such like that are going to be a bit trickier to kind of do interesting things with, especially with that kind of overlap. So I can't wait to kind of see what I can come up with those types of builds. I'm really, really looking forward to experimenting and seeing what I can come up with. I mean, hell, even Barbarian has a unique thing, because you could have two Wildheart Barbarians that do completely different things. So, I don't know. I'm really, really looking forward to this series. I think it's going to be a unique challenge. I think it's going to give you guys a hell of a lot of builds to work with. Again, you're getting 4 builds per video. And again, the challenge of not multi-classing, I've kind of fallen in love recently with just single-class builds. I mean, one of my more recent favorites was the Dark Urge build that we did recently, which was all Warlock, with a focus on boosting up and getting features from external sources, like the Slayer and the Psionic abilities. And I feel like this is going to provide a singular unique challenge. I don't think I'll be getting Psionic abilities with any of these characters unless I feel like it's just too good to pass up. Otherwise, I'll try and leave that behind. Again, no Ethel's Boon, no Potion of Everlasting Vigor on any of these builds in the series. I'm going to try and build these guys with just what they've got going for them and the equipment. And again, I feel like it's worked out really, really nicely. I think this first build, I mean, it was kind of easy to do, if I'm being honest. I mean, looking at Battle Master Fighter, I already knew what the distinctions were going to be, and then Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter were just obvious picks for the other two. Eldritch Knight was definitely the trickiest one, and again, you can kind of build it in different ways: a Blaster Caster, a concentration-based support, utility. You could or you could just play it as a fighter who just attacks 3 times per turn and uses the shield spell. Like, it's entirely up to you, but I really liked the dual wielding angle and I wanted to explore it here. Again, Kareska's Favor is a huge boon for this build, giving you those big spells every short rest, which is really, really nice. But yeah, I mean, those are the builds. I mean, nothing else to really say, so I think I'm going to sign off now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Please tell me that was recording, because I forgot to check if it was recording. I think it was. Okay, good. Phew. God, that was nearly 50 minutes long. Huh? Full party builds will do that to you.